Welcome to the National Women's Fitness Academy podcast. We're here to talk about women's health, female hormones, body image, and all things health and fitness.
Hello, girls. Welcome back to another episode of the Women's Fitness Academy's podcast. I'm your host, Siggy, one of the WFA's educators and a women's body image and mindset coach. Today's podcast is going to explode your mind about bodybuilding, about powerlifting, about your journey into the gym if you're one who's feeling a little bit insecure, because I'm talking with the lovely Lexi. And for those who don't know Lexi, she's an in-person and online coach from Brisbane who competes in an APL powerlifter and is also a WBFF bodybuilder. But don't be fooled, because it didn't come easy for Lexi, and I'm sure it didn't come easy for me and for you guys who are listening, because she went through a stage where she felt quite insecure in her own journey, but found that the gym was her safe place. And I can vouch to that because I felt really insecure during high school as well. So Lexi, I would love to know what made you tap into the gym when you felt so insecure in the early stages.
Oh, that is such a good question. Honestly, I think it was at the end of high school. I think it's a much bigger thing now, but I think I was really fortunate in high school that I did do a sport. I did rowing where you had to do gym training anyways, but I found it very much like a safety net because, I'd go to a gym that I didn't know anyone and I would just do like the 3 exercises that I knew how to do. I don't know. It all spurred from that, to be quite honest. And I think that the reason I started, I was like so unhappy with myself because I was stuck in that comparison. Like I've never been a super petite girl. Not that I would care now. I love that about myself. But, there was such a big stigma, especially in high school, like, the Victoria's Secret model look, like be small, skinny, whatever. So I think I really pushed to try and be like that. And I was like, oh, I'll go to the gym and do the 3 exercises I know. And then as I started to learn more, I was like, okay, like it's way cooler being muscly and, being strong, whatever. So it's kind of how it happened. Pretty simple.
What were the 3 exercises that got you started?
I knew how to do an RDL. I knew how to do a hip thrust and I knew how to do an assisted pull up. And I swear that's all I did. I don't know how I spent all my time in the gym because that's all I knew for like the first 2 years. But I was there, so it did something.
It definitely did. And it's so good to like reflect back and look at how far we've come, because I can relate to that so much. When I first started my journey, all I did was mainly cardio and copy like bodybuilding programs from bodybuilders online and YouTube. And I remember my go-to were RDL, pull-ups, assisted pull-ups, and the lat pull down. I was obsessed, absolutely obsessed.
Yes.
Obviously, as we expand our knowledge around it, we realize that, hey, there's other exercises that aren't going to be beneficial. And during your time in the gym, I know you explored a little bit more towards bodybuilding. I would love to know, like, what made you tap into that?
Okay, so once I got a little bit more comfortable in the gym and I graduated, and I was like doing my certificates for my PT, I had a mentor for my certs and he said he would be my coach. And, I'd never like done gym properly. I got like a program, I got a nutrition plan, I first hit my goal of like, getting that lean look. And then, he was a WBFF competitor. So he kind of like put the idea in my head, but at the time, like I was like, oh, no way, like I don't have a lot of muscle. Like I kind of steered away from the idea from a little bit until I went into a building phase. And I think when I got into that building phase, I really got into it. I was like, oh, cool. Like I'd love to show off like all the work that I had done. Like, I think I have like a decent look. Like, and then I started looking at more like influencers on Instagram. Like I looked at Hattie Boydell, I looked at Corey Loader. I was like, damn, these girls are like nuts. They look amazing. And I think I was like, okay, well, I'm into the gym and I love it. I'm a coach now. Like why? And I love competition, may I add. Like that's the sport that I did in high school is all about competing. So it's like, why don't I just put everything that I enjoy and everything that I think I'm good at and test myself, So it spurred from, disliking things about myself to falling in love with the gym to creating it to be like a lifestyle for myself. And I was like, yeah, fuck it. Like, oh, part of my French. I was like, let's, I'm gonna have to be really careful about my language. I didn't even think about that. But yeah, I just think as I fell in love with the gym and I fell in love with like, you know, making myself the best version of myself, I really wanted to test what I could do with my abilities there. So that was kind of what spurred me to do WBFF.
And you made such a good point. Before I continue, by the way, I swear all the time, so you're welcome to swear.
Okay, perfect. All right, good. I'm so glad.
Yeah, this is a very like open space for expressing yourself, and especially as we know with the Women's Fitness Academy, we're here to empower women to not feel as if we're
Yes.
stating them as too much. Like we all have various ways of expressing ourselves. So hey, if you enjoy swearing, fucking swear along, So
I love it. Okay.
back to what you were saying in terms of bodybuilding. You mentioned that there was an aspect, well, there was a time where you didn't like yourself or didn't like various parts of yourself, but then during that journey, it changed to loving yourself and competing. And I wanted to dive into that because too often we see women going into competition, whether it's bodybuilding and powerlifting, because they despise the way they look and feel about themselves. And I want us to explore a little bit more about this. Like, what was that transition for you? Like, what did it look like? And how did you notice the changes from, looking at yourself negatively to more of in a positive way?
I think for me, going back on the fact that I'd always not been petite, I think, to be honest, like at the time, I really needed to get to that lean point just to, my own mental satisfaction to be like, okay, like this is where I thought I would be happy. And I got to that point and I was like, okay, well, I'm really lean now and I don't look at myself and I'm like, oh, like I wish I was thin. But I looked at myself, I was like, oh, like, getting to the gym, I looked at all the girls with muscles and I was like, okay, like I want to build on that. And I think because I got to start from a point, or I saw that I don't have any foundations really, like I was quite small. I was like, okay, like I can build up from here. I think what changed my mindset was be able to build it back up in a positive way. And I could see positive changes in that way. And I don't always think that's like the best way to go about it. But I think the reason that a lot of people get into the gym in the first place is because, they think they want this one goal. And once they reach it, then they realize there's so many other things that they can reach and get to that would be more satisfying. So I think it was really just, I had to have that small thing happen and realize that there was so much more to being skinny. And then I realized how much cooler shit I could do. Like, oh, I could like get super cap delts or I could get a really big glutes or, big quads. And I started, steering away from wanting to be really thin and skinny or whatever because I was like, oh, it's like not that cool anymore for myself at least. I want to like get super muscly. I don't know. I think that's just what happened for me. I think I really needed to get over that mental hurdle and, get sick of being like really lean and then build off from there.
I can relate to that so much, especially when we're constantly getting fed old stories, whether it's through society, through our parents or friends, from a really young age, especially for women, we're constantly thinking that the smaller we are, the better we're going to be perceived by people or they're
100%.
going to accept us. Yet now these days, and it's slowly changing, and I know it'll change again within 5 years' time, it's making women realize
it does.
Yeah, I hope it does as well. And making women realize that, losing weight is a goal. And most of the time it's what women are wanting to strive for because they're not feeling worthy within themselves. And there's no wrong or right to go about it.
100%.
However, it does affect us negatively if we're constantly just thinking about it all the time. It's just like, fuck, like you're using so much energy for just wanting to look a certain way. Like, how about we start feeling differently and do the things that have been stopping you from doing?
Yeah, I totally agree.
It's
Definitely
so cool.
it.
Yeah. I love noticing that change. And obviously, you're a big advocate for it. So when you were doing bodybuilding and now you're a power lifter as well, like what was that transition for you? Like, what did it look like?
In all honesty, like, you know, I actually was doing my prep, and my coach at the time, we just did like random number testing, and we saw through my squat, deadlift, and bench that I was quite strong. I did a lot of like compound lifts when I was in my off season before my first competition, just because I enjoyed it and I thought it was cool getting strong, which it is. But I kind of realized I was strong then, and we had like a little bit of a fuck it moment. We're like, okay, like there's a comp coming up in like 5 weeks, just a novice comp. Let's just do it and see how we go. This is, what was it, like 18 weeks out from WBFF. And we did a 5 week prep for it, like did not take it seriously at all. And we did it. I came third, which was awesome. I really wasn't expecting anything. And then I dove back into my WBFF prep. My full focus was on that. And I think for me, when I came out of my WBFF prep, I knew that everyone talks about like post prep blues, and that feeling of what now, because you focus on this goal for 20 weeks or so, and you feel a little bit lost. So I think my mindset at the time was just to do something that had a goal set in mind. So it was, for me at first, it was definitely like, okay, I don't want to come out of this prep and feel really shitty about myself and feel lost and all that sort of stuff. So I think it was really something for me to focus on. And it turned out to be a really awesome focus, because it's super cool once you start focusing on it. So that was how it transitioned for me. And I've been doing it for 6 months now, so it's good.
I love it. And with that transition going from bodybuilding to powerlifting, have there been any mindset shifts around your training?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think basically it shifted my focus for a change from these goals are fine, may I add. It shifted my goal from just thinking about what these exercises would do for my physique, like visually, and it kind of steered the focus onto, okay, how will these functionally help me? And I think like coming out of a prep as well is so helpful, because it's like you have literally just been looking at yourself for 20 weeks, getting leaner and leaner and leaner, and like, wow, like so impressive. Like you pull on your skin, like it's lean as, like, I think it was really good just changing my mindset from like how I looked for a while, because I was obsessed with it. And I think anyone in a bodybuilding prep understands that feeling of being obsessed. And anyone with a big physique goal in mind, they know that they're always going to be obsessed, because you're always looking at the progress. So it was nice shifting my focus onto, okay, like how are these numbers getting better? Okay, look, how am I like fixing these weak points, or like how am I fixing my movements? I think it really helped my mindset, because I think if I hadn't have been focused on powerlifting, I would have really struggled with my reverse, which in all honesty I did as well, but it definitely saved me in that sense.
It's so cool. I love the fact that we're talking about this, because too often people look at powerlifting and bodybuilding as like two different modalities of competing, but from my understanding right now, there's a lot of similarities, and I would love to know, like, what are some similarities that you've noticed from being a bodybuilder, but also as a powerlifter?
Well, I think the first thing is, I think there's a very big stereotype with how powerlifters don't do much in the gym. And I thought you didn't do much in the gym either, to be fair. Like you just see like powerlifters sitting around between sets. But damn, like the like energy expenditure is like the same, if not more. Like you are absolutely cooking your CNS system every week. You're working your butt off, you're still like at a high RPE or an IRR, or like working at a high energy level. So I think that was the first thing for me. I was like, damn, like this training is still really hard. And I think another thing that was similar is like how serious you have to take both competitively. Like most people would know in a bodybuilding prep, you got to care about your nutrition, you got to care about your sleep, you got to care about your steps, you got to care about your cardio, you got to care about your water, you got to care about so much. And you think that wouldn't be the same in powerlifting, but if you're doing it competitively, 99% of the time you're also caring about your nutrition, because you have to fuel yourself properly, and then also you have to time carbs and that sort of stuff, like literally like complex carbs, different types of carbs, low GI carbs, and it's the same thing with water. Like if you're going into comp, you have to like water load and water cut, and then the list goes on. Like your sleep affects your training so much, like everyone knows that. It affects in bodybuilding like how much weight you're going to lose, or how well things go and all that sort of stuff. So both those aspects playing part of both of them when doing the competitively. You have to care about all of those factors because they make such a difference when you're doing it competitively. And that was so interesting to me because I was like, oh, this is going to be like super chill. I'm not even going to know what to do with myself. And I'm like, no, okay, I'm counting my calories. I'm, timing what type of carbs I have when. I need to figure out what low GI and high GI carbs are. I got to make sure I'm having this much sleep. I got to make sure I'm eating this food the night before if I'm training in the morning. I got to have this much water. You know what I mean? It's literally the exact same. Well, not the exact same as bodybuilding, but they're so similar just in their own sort of ways. And I thought that was really interesting.
I love how we've opened the discussion around this because too often, as you mentioned, people think as powerlifters as, they're just like these lazy sods and they're just like sitting around in between their sets. It's just like, no, they're actually working like really fucking hard to get to the goal that they're wanting to. And I love the fact that you also mentioned about food as well. Like too often people kind of like, I wouldn't say they brush it off, but they don't go in the depths of what nutrition looks like for a powerlifter. Like, yes, we need to hit our protein, fats, and carbs, but you've mentioned twice already about hitting low GI and high GI carbs. And I would love to know, like, what does that look like for you in terms of like, pre-training or post-training or even post-competition? Like, how did you navigate around your carbs during that time?
Okay, this is going to be really hard for me to articulate because I had a coach who helped me a lot with this nutrition side of things, but I'll do my best. So obviously, like carbs are a really important source of fuel, but I would have to train at different times of the day throughout the week, leading into like peaking for my first comp. So I'd have to time carbs really well, so I'd have the energy to do it because I'd be doing like heavy sets of like doubles or singles for all the compound lifts. So it'd be super important. So if I were to be training first thing in the morning and I would have only been able to get one meal in before, I'd have to make sure I was eating, I think it's low GI, don't quote me on this. It probably is low GI carbs the night before. So I'd have to have like a big meal of carbs the night before. And, when I wake up first thing in the morning, have like 50 grams of oats and all that sort of stuff. And you'd want to like have coffee, like caffeine, because it is scientifically proven to improve sports performance, whatever. So there's actually like a lot of thought that went into it. And if I was training later in the day, we'd always make sure it was my squats because we found that the more carbs, the better because it is such a difficult lift. So we'd like time what times I'd have food. I'd have 50 grams of carbs per meal just to make sure that I had enough fuel to like perform all my sets properly. So that's really the thing with carbs, like they're utilized so well and you'd feel like you're eating so much carbs as well, which is also super cool because you think you're, eating all this food, but because your CNS system is working so much, I was eating like all this food and it doesn't go anywhere either. So it's pretty crazy, like the manipulation of food with powerlifting as well as bodybuilding, because, you do the same in each.
I love that. And you know what? I think it's quite a good in relation to everyday nutrition as well. Obviously, for your everyday gem pop person, they're not necessarily having to worry about the low GI and the high GI foods across the day, as long as we're getting that balanced blood sugar levels. Because we too often we know if we're having quite a low GI foods, whether it's like porridge with like honey, we know it's going to go straight through them. However, if they're having like more high GI, where it's just like long grains and like potatoes, it's going to fill them a little bit fuller. So I love the aspect that you went around this by, making people understand, hey, it's not as easy as just protein, fats, and carbs. It takes a little bit of calculation around that. And obviously you had a coach, you've learned about it. And so for anyone who's listening, who's wanting to compete, get yourself a coach.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. I'm a coach myself. And look, I've had 7 coaches and I'll never stop having coaches. That's the thing. Like coaches are so helpful. There's always going to be someone who's more knowledgeable than you. And I think that, if you're going to get a coach, it's almost a green flag that they have a coach as well, because it means they're always open to learning and they're always open to bettering themselves. Little side note.
I know, right? A big side note, honestly.
Big side note. I know. I was like, not a little one.
Not little at all. And it's funny because someone actually asked me a question in my stories today on Instagram going, what are my thoughts about investing into coaches? And I was just like, it's the best investment you're ever going to make, because it baffles me
100%.
that there's certain coaches out there who have never invested in coaching. So it makes me wonder, like, how are you able to coach people when you have never been coached? Like, you just don't know.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I completely agree. Like, out of all the 7 coaches I've had as well, I've learned they're all so different. And
Mm.
I've taken something that I like out of all of them, kind of, it's like a little bit of shopping. Like, you take what you like, and you can relay it onto other people. I think it's so important. And I love getting new coaches as well. Like, I'm in the middle of getting a new coach myself at the moment, and I've talked to these 2 different coaches, and I'm like fascinated with the knowledge that different people have and what people specialize in. So I think it's awesome. Definitely 10 out of 10 get a coach.
Yeah, 100%. So cool. What was I going to ask? Oh yeah, in regards to the back to the powerlifting and the bodybuilding. So, we've talking a little bit about the misconceptions and how, like, there's quite a few similarities between that. How have you found powerlifting assisting your bodybuilding journey, and vice versa?
Yes. Okay. So I think this is an individual thing, because I know a lot of high level bodybuilding coaches, a lot of high level powerlifting coaches and athletes will say that you can't really do them together to a high level. And to an extent, I agree. I think if you're going to, pursue one really well, you can't be doing the other at the same time. It's just like with any sport, with an Olympic swimmer, they're not going to be spending all their time cycling or something. They're going to be focusing on swimming. So I think if you're going to really focus on one, you're going to have to pick one. But for the moment, I'm not a pro athlete in either, which I'm so fine with. I love having the opportunity to do both while I can, before I have to make it a decision. But I think I completely forgot the question, because I literally just went on a tangent.
I love that. I was asking how has powerlifting assisted your bodybuilding journey and vice versa?
Yeah, cool. I think that's so funny. I think it's definitely with powerlifting assisting bodybuilding. I think, working my body to that extent, and how important like periodization is. So like a form of progressive overload, how I've seen it worked into my programming, and how I've had to train like that. I think it's definitely changed my perspective of how hard I work in my own training. I think it's really normal for people to get complacent when they train, whether they're an athlete or a beginner. It's really easy to be like, oh, like that was hard. Like I don't want to do anymore. Or, like it really hurt. Like I think, doing powerlifting and working to like a true 1 RM, and, feeling how hard that is and how hard you can push your body to when you think you can't do it anymore. And, those mental walls are there. I just think that powerlifting really helps with bodybuilding in a sense. You can push that extra level harder that maybe you've been complacent with sometimes. At least that's for me. I think really testing my body with powerlifting has opened a door of what level I can train at when I am doing, more hypertrophy style training.
With the level of training, have you come across a time where you felt you were being complacent?
I think I can get complacent sometimes, especially I think since WBFF a little bit. It's easy to get complacent because I have like repetitive programs, which is super cool. Like I don't think there's any reason to change a program a lot, but when you're doing the same program for 15 weeks, you're like, oh, like, I know I can do like this amount of weight and it's hard every time. So I think sometimes I can get complacent in the sense like, oh, I don't push as hard as I could. So a really good example of this actually is I was with my coach the other week, and I hadn't had an in-person coach for a while, which I also love in-person coaches for this reason. I was like, oh, I can only do like, 15 kilos on this pendulum. And she's like, no, like puts an extra 5, doesn't give me a choice. And I was like, okay, I still did the full 12 reps, but I obviously wasn't pushing as hard. So I think, that's the complacency. It's like something already feels hard, and you can remember the first time you did it and it was really hard. So I think sometimes you think you can't go heavier. So I think that was a reminder for me, and advice for anyone else. Like even if something feels really hard or difficult and you don't think you can do anymore, there's no harm in just trying to go harder. You know what I mean? And that's not even just in the gym. Just try a little more. If you fail, like that's fine. Like you just failed. It's not the end of the world. So I think that was definitely an eye opener for me. It's like shit. Like I am getting a little complacent. So yeah, I think that was definitely an eye opener.
And I think that mindset of complacency comes also from like not necessarily a fear of pushing. What would it be? Just like sometimes, we think we can't do much, but then we're pushing ourselves a little bit more, and we like kind of realize, oh,
Definitely.
I am able to push myself harder. Like
Yeah.
why was I being, so like
Yeah.
silly about it?
I think it's like a comfortability thing too. Like I think people talk about it a lot, and I think it happens to everyone, athlete or not. Like it's just this comfortability, like, you're comfortable with this level of difficulty, but it's like, no, like you need to keep pushing whatever stage you're at, you think you're working hard enough sometimes, but you're not. So I think it's a comfortability thing for sure as well.
What would your advice be for someone who feels as if they're wanting to take it to the next level, but they're being way too fucking comfortable with themselves?
Honestly, there's no other way of saying this. Just fucking do it. Like there's no other way. Like if you want to go somewhere in life, you want to go, like, you want to get better in the gym, you want to do something with your job, you want to do something with your life, start a business, whatever, like you can keep thinking about it and you can keep doing the same things. But if they're not working, like something needs to change. So just full send it, see what fucking happens, honestly, because you know, like you're not gonna know till you try it. It's as simple as that. Like you just got to do it sometimes. Just push.
100%. And you know what? It takes us back to when we first started in the gym. Like we didn't know what we were doing, yet we still went in there, started doing the 3 exercises that we were obsessed with. And then eventually, like, look at us now, where we're coaches, we're teaching other people to do the same. So
Definitely.
I love that.
So cool.
So good. Yeah, it's amazing. It's so like, being able to reflect back on seeing like how far you've come. Too often, especially for women, like we don't give ourselves enough credit of the achievements that we've done.
Yeah, I totally agree. We write ourselves off so much. It's terrible. And like I think any client or friend that I ever talk to, even if I like think this person's the most amazing person in the world, the self-talk is nuts. Like I think everyone like does not give themselves enough credit, especially women.
Yeah, especially women. Yeah. How do you give yourself a little bit more credit?
I think it comes down to self-awareness, to be honest. Like, and I actually think a big part of it comes into play. And like I look back at where I have been, and I'm a very goal-driven person. So I'm always looking at like where I want to be, right? But you have the mini goals and you're kind of hitting them, and then you look back and you're like, oh, like a year ago, like I wouldn't have done a bodybuilding competition or a powerlifting competition. Like I would have like loved to hit those goals. And I would have thought they were so cool. So I got to remind myself of those moments, because now doing both of those things, I'm like, oh, like I need to do more. Like, like I'm not that happy with that now. But then I remember I'm like, no, like you should be so happy with that. So I think it comes down to being self-aware and, looking back at how you have been in the past and where you are now. So that's what it is for me.
I love that. And I think everyone needs to start doing a little bit more of that, because then we get into this like negative bias where it just drains our energy. And then we're constantly thinking of how, like where we're wanting to be, but then not being able to actually reach the goals that we're striving to be, because we're not acknowledging of how far we've come.
100%. And even for people who haven't necessarily done a big competition or something, like you gotta, even if you want to, like you look back at like what you were doing when you were 15 years old or something. Let me tell you, like you're a lot more impressive than you were at 15. You got to think, well, what would the younger version of myself think? Like full-time job, I don't know, whatever it is that you're doing. Like the 15-year-old version of yourself is probably so impressed and didn't even know what they wanted to do. So they would think that's impressive in itself. So I think everyone's got to be a little bit kinder to themselves and remember that part.
100%. And you know what, like you made such a good point, because as someone like yourself, you've been in the industry for, a couple of years now. And as you mentioned, you're very goal driven towards your goals. So I would love you to share like what is your, your next goal as a coach or even as a competitor? Like what's the big vision right now?
The big vision. Well, let's think about it this way. Okay, so I've got APL Nationals coming up, and it's honestly for me with powerlifting, I love it so much. But it's more so experience for me. I love it, but my heart lies in bodybuilding. So I think, getting that done and having that experience there and having that for people to see and reflect on that I've done that sort of thing. Honestly like it's always a business thing when it comes to coaching. It always looks better when you've done stuff because you can't coach something if you haven't done it yourself. That's just my opinion. But yeah, so after that, I think I'm obviously studying the Women's National Academy. Like that's awesome. I started doing boys and girls when I first started coaching, but I only do girls pretty much now. And, a big goal for me is making all my training and all my coaching more focused on women, their hormones, taking into consideration their cycle, having more knowledge with nutrition. I think that's super important because everything's neglected so much. Like, I remember when I first started coaching and a client came to PCOS, I'd heard of it. I'm a female and I didn't know anything about it either. Like that's how little people know about, our women know about themselves. So I think that's a big thing for me. Obviously, like learning more about women and being able to service my girls better and giving them the best service I can provide and educating themselves about themselves because, I'm learning things as I go along. I think it's something that's so important. So that's definitely a big thing for me. And, goals for myself, just really smash out bodybuilding. I don't know when I'd compete again. I do the fitness category for WBFF. I came third place last time. And WBFF is just growing. Like the girls in the April show that just passed, phenomenal. Man, like, wow. I was like looking at the stage and I was like, these girls are nuts. So I think it would just be about growing and, getting to a physique that I'm happy with again. So whether that be at the end of October next year or later than that, I'm not rushed. But I would just want to bring to stage something that I'm proud of again. So it's literally just, improving my education as a coach and, doing bodybuilding again. And I want to, go pro, do whatever, that sort of thing. So I feel like, yeah, that's it.
I love it. So, so good. Well, I'm looking forward to following the journey and seeing where it takes you. But
Thank you.
Before we finish off, how can our listeners get in contact with you and how can they follow your journey for inspiration?
Okay, so the best way to contact me is always through Instagram. I let people DM me all the time. That's just easy as I love communicating with people. So my Instagram is Lexi Samios Fit. The last name is Samios, if anyone didn't know, and there's no E with Lexi. Yeah, just DM me. I'm pretty chill.
I love how we need to put like a side note. It's like Lexi with no E.
I know. Well, actually, a lot of people like to spell it Lexie, which is fair, like, but it's not that. So I'm just clarifying.
I love that. Well, girls, I hope you got so much value from today. I know I sure did. I love learning from many, many women, and I got a new perspective around powerlifting and bodybuilding and how we don't necessarily have to separate them completely because they do have the similarities and they kind of assist one another. So yeah, girls, if you enjoyed today's podcast, please make sure that you let us know, give us some feedback, DM me, DM Lexi, let us know how you found it, and screenshot it, tag us at the Women's Fitness Academy. And then till next time, let's pursue those goals, girls.
Yes, love it.